Hi there people, this is a new video on melody writing and texture, and it features in both parts of that Dr. Smith thing, and it's called Imitation, and it's very easy to work out what it means. Okay, so you can think of it as two overlapping melodies. Both the melodies are the same, except the second one, and possibly the third one, and the fourth one, and the fifth one is delayed. And so you get these staggered entries. And if you've ever sung rounds at primary school, like Three Blinds Mice and London's Burning, you might have done this. And you can see in the example on the left that the melody in part 1 starts, and then in bar 5 exactly the same thing is then stated. It's the whole tune starting on again, and then when tune 1 finishes, part 2 carries on, and it'll be identical as the overlap runs out. Now that came from a great website called Music Theory Academy. I would definitely go and visit them. Lots of other ways of explaining the definitions that you need to know for Dr. Smith and what we're talking about for composition. Really good resource. I would go and give it a look. So here is the piece of music which we're going to use as an example, and I'm trying to demonstrate that this music technique, like all of the music techniques, doesn't have to be classical or Western art music at all. You can use it in any genre with a bit of imagination. So I spent 10 minutes doing a bit of research on what commercial music sounds like at the moment, and this is just a really broad sketch. I know that doing imitation when you're composing can be really tricky, because to try and make it fit over the chords that you've got going on is can be challenging, can get very complicated very quickly. So one little trick is, if you're trying a more complicated technique in your texture or in your melody, then you keep one of the other elements of music fairly simple, so we're not giving our listeners too much to process at one time. So I only alternate here between two chords. I'm alternating between the tonic and the dominant. One thing I noticed listening to the music this morning was that either the music that we're listening to on YouTube at the moment, what's trending at the moment, is either non-diatonic, and we'll talk about that in another video, or it's actually quite simple harmonically. So we're just alternating between in A minor, chord 1, which is A, C and E, and chord 5, which is E, G sharp and B, because I'm using the harmonic version of a scale. G natural could be a possibility as well if you wanted to use the natural version. Right, so first thing you need if you're going to do some imitation is have something to imitate. So I went for a sort of fairly epic sounding. I selected French horns because they're used loads in movies and stuff at the moment for all these heavy superhero type things, and I did something really stupid. I made it go imitation. Okay, I hope you can hear that. I won't sing it to you now. Oh, sorry, the formula for that is this. Okay, so we have 3 notes. We're starting on the second half of beat 1. We've got 2 semiquavers for the ima, and then we've got te, shun, and these are quavers, and they fall by a third. If you watch the video on sequences, we talk a little bit about this. If we were coming down the scale, we would be going C, B, A. That is a third, and I'll just show you what that looks like here. So coming down there, counting that note as 1 because we're working out interval 1, 2, 3. We're coming down a third, in this case a minor third. Right, and then I copy that a little bit for this bit. We've got the imitation. This is down a third as well, coming down from A to F, and then I do a slight tweak, and then we state it again so our audience can actually pick up on it and realize what's going on. Let's hear this with the strings now, which do the imitation. They copy the same thing back. Alright, so you'll notice it's not straight imitation. We'll talk about that in a second. Right, so the French horns were doing something which picked out the notes in A minor. They were going C, 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 A. That's because for the first 2 beats of every bar it's A minor, so I can pick up those chord tones. In the second half of each bar I'm on the dominant, which is that E major chord, so this section here is all going to be, so can I draw it? Yes, so anything in that space there is going to be E major. So I couldn't use A and F again because that would sound really unpleasantly discordant. So I selected notes to do the same pattern. You can see staying on the same note 3 times in a row and then falling in a third. And that comes from here, look. So that going for the G sharp and the E, because that is the chord that the band are playing at that particular time. So that's where we get that from. He said, come on, Logic. Okay, now it happens again. You can overdo this kind of thing, so I did an alternative to bring us back round to the beginning of the cycle. Now this looks incredibly complicated, but it really isn't. We've got an E, a G sharp, and a B. We are still working over the dominant chord. Whoops, not there. That comes from... let's just open it like that then. Okay, there we go. Skills, you didn't notice anything. Alright, so those E, G sharp and B come from there, from the dominant, and this note here is a C. This is like an auxiliary note. This is to help me step back down towards the A. So I just slot it in the gap between the G sharp and the B. I know that's going to sound fairly decent because it's in the scale. So I go E, G sharp. I need the space filled by another note that's not in that triad, otherwise I'm going to run out of notes. So I choose C, and then I use the B. E, G sharp, C's an auxiliary note, and then to the B. You'll see what I mean now. Okay, so that's a bit of an aside, that little fill there, but it's going to show that if you've got too much imitation going on, you can generate other material fairly easily. Alright, so you can put it in the accompaniment, you can have this imitation going on as part of your texture. We can also have it going on as a melodic device. So, let's have a listen to what that sounds like. I've got here a melody which is going to be imitated. Let's listen to the melody to start off with. Okay, now let's have a look at what that looks like. So there are the notes, and there's what it looks like with the real dots. So, because it's going to be imitated, I wanted to make it fairly obvious, so I did something which is syncopated. It comes in as semiquaver after beat 3, and we can see that there. And it's using all the notes in A minor. Okay, and I wanted to give it this sort of like spooky feel, so I made sure I got a semitone going on here. Now this is the first 2 beats of the bar. My chord change, the first 2 beats of the bar is, let's just make sure it's really obvious, A minor, and that involves the notes A, C and E. So these notes here are E, and then I wanted that semitone going up to the F. Where does the F come from? It's in the scale. And then here the band is playing underneath in the accompaniment. It is a dominant chord, and we can see that there. So I wanted to emphasize that G sharp, and I wanted to emphasize the F, because we've got that augmented second interval there. It's really spooky. And it also gives me the third in the melody, which is always a good thing to do. And then I quoted myself with a very similar kind of feel going on here, starting on the second semiquaver of beat 3. And we did a little same, imitated the motif again. And then we got a little bit of decoration going around the chord notes, and then finishing on the dominant note. And let me just make sure you can see that from this perspective. Good. So we can see we've got very similar features here, which should make the imitation a lot more obvious. So let's have a listen. I put it in a synthesizer. I'm not saying this is genius, but it's just it's an example to start off with. Now it's okay, but only okay. One of the issues with it is that I had to move this one up an octave because it sounded too muddy down low in the original octave, the same octave as the piano. That doesn't matter though, because it helps separate the two things out. If we have a look at the notes, you can see, if you're a bit of a boffin like I am, that there are some issues. We got lots of unwanted dissonance going on here. Look, I've got an F and a B going on at the same time, and the chord underneath is in the second half of the bar, so it's the dominant chord E major with an E, a G sharp and a B. This here is too nasty, and then this doesn't work either. Let's have another listen to it. With it was that this is a really interesting feature, but the original melody is also trying to do something quite interesting at the same time, and our ear can't process those two really interesting things going on at once, especially when you've got a beaty, noisy accompaniment going on underneath. So I needed to simplify this section so that when the imitation was happening one bar later, I could listen to both at the same time. So let's have a listen to the improved version. Okay, so you should be able to hear there, well, I'm going too far now. That works really nicely because that's simple there. It lets the imitation come out in the synthesizer voice here, no problems at all. And then because we've got this overlap going, because this bit's simple, when it's being imitated and delayed over here, it lets this feature come through here. So there's a much nicer to and froing between the two parts, I think, anyway. And then you could carry that on as long as you like. It was quite easy to do. All I did was take this one, the original phrase, and I used out to cut and paste it down, and I delayed it a bar. It did take some fettling. It did take me a little while to get this all sorted out, but it's a really good device to use. I think the key is to make sure that if you're doing something complicated like imitation, and you're planning to use something complicated like imitation, do something simple underneath. These chords underneath are only just alternating between chord 1 and 5. Okay, and it's really straightforward. It's a great technique to go on if you're thinking about, levels 7, 8 and 9. It's definitely worth investigating something like Imitation. It really proves that you've got good musical chops. Alright people, pleasure to talk to you. I will see you again soon.